Well, yeah, thank you everyone so far that's joined. I think there's a few more that will join along the way, but thanks for joining me today. And even with the number of people that are on this call right now, I think it's the highest number of people we've had for one of our webinars. So it's clearly a topic of real interest, and I just hope I can do it justice for you today. But today isn't all about me presenting my views to you. So, perhaps it's more of a fireside chat than it is a webinar. And I'm really pleased to be able to welcome Pip Spicer and Jonathan Reynolds to the fireside today. We're going to be talking about their experiences, their frustrations, maybe their wish lists, but we're going to be examining what they've got to say about the subject of audit and inspection, and in particular root cause analysis. But let me just make a short introduction to them both first, if you wouldn't mind. Pip is the quality management systems lead at Viridor. And if you don't know Viridor, shame on you, but they're one of the UK's leading renewable energy and plastics processing companies based out of Taunton. So welcome, Pip. And Jonathan is the relatively newly appointed asset HSE lead for Perenco UK. And Perenco are a large independent oil and gas company. They've got operations across about 14 or 15 countries globally. Jonathan's probably thanking his lucky stars. He doesn't have to look after all of those. But Jonathan, welcome to the call as well. Looking forward to speaking to you both. Now, many of you on the call know that STC and CISO, the company that I work for, there's a few other STC and CISO folk on the call as well. We've got a particular interest and a skill set in all things root cause analysis and root cause learning, as we prefer to call it. And we've often pondered on the extension of RCA techniques, particularly our COMET methodology that, again, many on the call are familiar with, to other areas of business and functional activity. And about a year ago, we decided to start working on a project that looked at root causation resulting from audit and inspection activities. And we'll explore a bit more why we think that's an area of interest. And since then, we've been very quietly going about building some new functionality that gets released soon. But what I want to do is just widen this debate a little bit further, because people do seem very interested in this subject, notable by the number of people that are on the call today. And I want to explore the challenges that are sometimes faced by audit and inspection regimes, as we all know and love them, what value that we can derive from them. And by that, I mean the indicators that we all look to tell us that things are okay. Can RCA unlock more insight into why non-conformances pop up and often repeat? And ultimately, whether expanding our view of root cause to incorporate both incident and organisms can help us tune into some of those weaknesses that we can address before they result in harm. So quite an expansive conversation, I hope. So let's make a start on the main event. If I could ask that you leave questions until the end, and only because we want to keep the flow going, we want to keep the pace going, we don't want to overrun by 35 minutes like Mark Rushton. And just another gentle reminder, if you can mute your microphones, unless of course you're either Pip or Jonathan, because that just wouldn't make a very good discussion otherwise. Or indeed, if you've got a really, really, really burning question that you need to ask, then please do keep microphones muted, because it just helps us get through this webinar in an efficient way. Now, Pip and Jonathan are going to be pleased to know that I've got a couple of pages worth of questions for them here, which sounds quite daunting, but let me open up with a nice straightforward one, and perhaps Pip, if I could go to you first, just to get the ball rolling. If you consider the approach that lots of organisations, lots of projects maybe, take to their audit and inspection regime, and from your experience currently and from the past, the kind of challenges and some of the frustrations that you'd point to that perhaps might resonate with some of the people on the call today.
Good one. Yeah, I think I think I have a slightly nicer approach to auditing, because I always I don't like doing an audit, dropping it and walking away from it and go, get on with it. You kind of want to know, you want to investigate it afterwards, and you want to look at all audits as a whole. Personally, I'd like to see, you carry out a range of audits across your company, and from that you want to know, well, are our systems actually working? What gaps do we have? If there are gaps, why are there gaps? Is it because people aren't following a procedure? Maybe it's the procedures that need tweaking and amending. So you're always, is it a training culture? So you're always looking for ways to, I look at it that it's a good time to sort of review your systems and have a look at things and see what improvements you can do, but also I want to see trends. Is there a trend? Is it just site specific? Does it, do we have an issue that we could address maybe at different sites before it became a problem? Do we need to sort of go, well, there's an issue at this site, shall we go in and have a look, give them a hand and get them back up to where they should do? I want to see but I need all the data. And I think my frustration with how I've always had sort of audits, they've all been quite sort of heavily paper based, or even if they're sort of uploaded and electronic, it's hard to pull that data together. It's really admin intensive. So you've got to go and look for things. You've got to open the documents, you've got to see it. And then people if they've got actions, you have to go and check to make sure that they've closed their action out sufficiently. I want to see evidence, and half the time that evidence isn't there because they don't upload, they just close it out and say it's done. Well, okay, well, what were the outcomes? What do we need to look into this? There's no real root cause analysis in it to try and improve our systems. And I think it's not always the case, but a lot of the time I think, it's an audit's just, oh God, let's just get it out of the way, let's just close the actions out. And they don't take the time to sort of investigate it and to see, what can we improve? Can we get better at things? Can we sort of, what's out there? Can we share best practice? Can we, and that's my frustration, is that we have to do audits for whatever reason, whether it's contractual, because of our ISO standards, because of legislation, we have to do them. But I don't think people really give them the time of day they should, and they panic about it last minute. Whereas really we should have a different attitude to audits, that, do you know what, it's looking at our systems and it's, can we improve it? Can we get better from them? And that's the way I like it. And maybe it's just the culture thing, but some people are really sort of, good at doing this, and then other areas of businesses maybe aren't quite so good. And those are my frustrations.
Pippi, it sounds like you might need a stiff whiskey after articulating all those backers.
It was a lot. I'm trying to keep it condensed.
No, it's perfect. And Jonathan, I'm just, you've probably got a different set of experiences, but I wonder if there's anything similar in there for you. But Alan always tells me you never ask a two-part question, but I'm going to, because I'm also interested in how you've gone around, or how typically you would go around assessing whether the audit regime that's in place is actually making a difference. Because otherwise, it's a waste of time, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, there was a lot of things that Pip said there which kind of resonated with me. A lot of things around, are the standards or procedures accurate in the first place? And I kind of like to look at auditing as not just a one-trick pony. It's verification and validation. So what I mean when I say that is verification that, yes, the business or business unit that we're looking at does what our arrangements say they should do, but then also that verification piece of actually is what our arrangements direct the business to do the right thing to do still, and sometimes that is different. People be familiar with a similar sort of process there, where you look at auditing your arrangements and actually then going out and auditing what they're doing on the ground, and they're not always mutually exclusive. But getting towards the kind of second part of your question there, Steve, very similar experiences to Pip. A large kind of over-reliance at times with Excel. I know if you haven't got some businesses that I've worked for previously, if you haven't got a all singing, all dancing system or software piece, then what do? You go to Microsoft and you make a Microsoft Word document or Microsoft Excel spreadsheet fit what you need to do, and you try and make the best of what you have. Same can be said for action tracking. Massive spreadsheets, trackers, Kanbans, all those sorts of conventional kind of project tools that you just make work. How do you assess whether your audit regime is actually making a difference? For me, it's the so what. Actually, do you look at your loss causation? Do you look at your injuries the same way you look at your audit actions and findings? And actually, are there any precursors from your audit findings that you could say, actually, those precursors are actually underlying causes to some of your incidents? And then going back there to management team and conveying that message loud and clear to give them the comfort or chronic unease, I suppose, is someone that I previously worked with used to use to get that message across. Do we give them the warm fuzzy feeling, or don't we? I suppose it's simply put.
So, Jonathan, just picking through those points that you've mentioned there, the kind of disjointed nature in which some of these kind of audit programs are put together, a combination of an Excel spreadsheet, a Word document somewhere, maybe you've got a repository for the reports and the outcomes, you might manage actions somewhere else, and the follow-up and effectiveness that you spoke about, Pip, and the kind of admin heavy and lack of RCA in many cases, from the audit regime. I'm just interested in, when it comes round to monthly reporting time or quarterly reporting time, whatever the frequency happens to be, and you're taking the results of your audit program back to, it might be your executive board, it might be an audit committee if it's at that level. Equally, it might just be at management team level. I'm interested in, what is it that you're presenting back? What kind of KPIs are you using to do that? And Pip, perhaps if I could come to you first to find out your experience, please. You're on mute. It was always going to happen, wasn't it?
It's the most common saying now, isn't it? Okay, so generally we report on what audits we've done. So how many were planned and how many have we actually carried out. We report on findings. So how many findings were there? How many have been closed out? How serious were the findings? And as we all know, everyone has different ways of expressing compliances and A's, B's, C's, all of that sort of thing. So you've got to streamline all of those. What's overdue? Those are the sort of areas that they cover. And then it's split into sort of like sites and functions and overall company performance, and internal and external as well. But that's a bit sort of, this is what we've done. I don't feel that you ever see the benefits out of auditing from that. They're just numbers. They're like you say, they're base KPIs and they're numbers. You don't see what the actual outcomes. What have you done about it? What have we improved? What have we actually sort of highlighted here? Why the benefits of doing audits and that sort of thing, and how we can sort of put better risk controls in. We can, our events have been reduced as far as incidents and sort of, things that happen on site and that we pick up in audits, and you know, it's not looking at how we improve things. And it's, I don't know, personally, I think I've struggled with that on demonstrating that we actually do bring value to a company. So especially if you approach it in the right way, you're continuously improving. You're looking at quality the whole time. And I don't feel that audits have really looked at that in that way in all cases. And it's a bit of a shame, because we can bring a lot of value to companies.
Absolutely. I think that plays to your point, Jonathan, that it's got to answer the so what question, hasn't it? And I know that organisations that I've been involved in, and I'm guilty of it myself as well, I've taken reports, you know, to your point, Pip, that just show me, well, I planned to do this many and I did this many, and I found these many things and they were classified as this, and here's all my actions, and here's where I am in terms of closing them out. And that seems to kind of equal success of an audit program, which we know it doesn't, because we want to know why these findings have occurred or perhaps keep occurring. And of course, you know, the best way to do that is through what you mentioned earlier on, you know, using RCA techniques. And I'm going to turn to Alan now. He's probably going to slap me for this after this webinar, but I can see him on my screen. And you know, Alan's been around the world of investigation in a criminal and a corporate you know, way for a long time now. What he doesn't know about investigation and root cause analysis, frankly, isn't worth knowing. But Alan, I just wonder, perhaps just tapping into your experience of what you could, you know, potentially gain, you know, through investigation of incidents and near miss events, the things that you've spotted that perhaps if acted upon earlier, you know, could have prevented or certainly mitigated consequences. What would you point to?
Yeah, thanks, Steve. Well, you know, most people on the call that I know here know my passion around this, but also the kind of legacy, you know, the heritage behind this goes back decades, I think, where, you know, I've investigated far too many fatality incidents in the past, or serious life-changing incidents. And I can hand on heart tell everybody here that not one of these investigations failed to uncover a missed opportunity by the organisation to close out a risk or a threat. And, you know, this is where organisations are really vulnerable if they're not careful. You can have auditing and inspection regimes going on every day of the week, but if something that you hope never happens does happen, and then the regulatory authorities come along, like I've done and Martin on the call's done in the past. I've led corporate manslaughter, corporate homicide investigations into organisations. You know, the first line of investigation we'll instigate is, let's go back and look at this organisation's own internal auditing inspection regime. And are they serious about it? And if, as often happens, you uncover an audit that predates the incident you're investigating, where findings were surfaced that were never closed out, or they were deferred, or the business decision was taken to park them up, potentially for all the right reasons, if it's defensible, but quite often it's not. It's not clear. Why did we go to the effort of uncovering this, but we didn't close it out? And I could give you examples for the rest of the call where organisations boardrooms have been agonising with themselves because, you know what, we had the opportunity, it was in our gift to solve this, but we chose not to do that, or we overlooked it, or we missed it somewhere, it fell between the cracks. And there's no second chance with these things, you know, because if you think a non-conformance during an audit or an inspection is effectively an incident without consequence, the root causes that lead to that non-conformance, the ones that are spawned, will be the very same root causes spawned during a subsequent incident. So to me, it's kind of obvious that organisations need to marry up what they're doing on the kind of audit and inspection side and the investigation side, because you're talking the same language, or if you're not, you ought to be talking the same language. Otherwise, what's the point? So, yeah, loads of examples, but yeah, I just get dismayed at organisations that don't seem to make the connection between we need to marry up our audit and inspection activity with the activity that we're doing in investigations, because you only get the odd opportunity to do investigations. Thankfully, they don't come around that often. We don't want them. But, you know, audits are an opportunity to learn, a safe opportunity. And all too often, Steve, as you know, it's often too late. The opportunity's missed, you know.
Yeah. It sounds to me, sorry, Steve, I came in there, but, you know, just for me to kind of ask to Alan, you know, it sounds like some of these incidents, or at least, you know, the causation that sat behind them was foreseeable from audits. So, you know, are you kind of confident that we can predict incidents before they happen ultimately?
Need to be very, very careful about that. Incident prediction is not an exact science, and I would be very, very uncomfortable talking about suggesting that organisations can predict incidents, because that's not realistic. What you could do, or what I'm sure you can do, is that I could predict if an organisation doesn't fix X, Y, and Z, that at some point in the future they're probably going to have an incident. And you know what? The causation behind that incident will take you right back to the audit or non-conformance. So yeah, the link is definitely there. You know, the time, the date, the location. You can't do much about that, you know. But you know, and Pip made a really valid point, you know, about the quality of the audits. You know, it's like investigations. If the input data for an investigation is flaky, then the output of the investigation will similarly be flaky. And if you're going to build actions based on that, good luck to you. But if, you know, so if the audits aren't quality based, then it could be giving the organisation a kind of soft and fuzzy feeling that isn't deserved. Many on this call will remember 1988, the Piper Alpha. If you just think about that disaster that occurred in the North Sea, you know what? One of the biggest findings of that incident was that the quality of audits on the Piper Alpha were garbage. They were rubbish. They were misleading the management team into a false sense of security. And Lord Cullen, you know, spoke at length in his findings about the fact that if only they hadn't allowed themselves to be deluded by the quality of their safety management systems, and actually the audits had been a little bit more robust and a little bit more probing and a little bit more, dare I say it, uncomfortable, who knows? Things could have changed on that night, you know. I know that's a long time ago, 30, 40 years ago, but it's still relevant today. We're still seeing that stuff in investigations as recently as a few weeks ago, you know, so it does happen.
Yeah, it does. Alan, thanks. And Jonathan, seeing as how you barged in before me, then I'm going to come back to you now, because I want to stick with this theme of RCA, because you know, Alan's very nicely articulated, you know, that relationship between what we find from audits and inspections and ultimately what we then find when we have incidents with consequence, or those that have got, you know, significant potential to have consequence as well. And it always baffles me, because root cause analysis has been around for probably at least as long as I have been, and probably longer. But it doesn't appear that many organisations, and I'm not saying all, because there could be some people on the call today that use it actively all the time, but I don't come across many organisations that do use root cause analysis techniques to uncover the reasons why there might have been a compliance gap or a non-conformance or a weakness found through audit and inspection. And I'm left wondering why. Have you got any insight, opinion, conjecture you'd like to offer us?
Yeah, you know, I've asked myself those kind of questions sometimes, Steve, and you know, when I've looked in the past, looked over things, there doesn't appear to be much out there on the market, or it's just not finely tuned enough in the Google search engine to find it easily. But, you know, much beyond the traditional 5 whys, you know, fish bones, cause and effects charting, type stuff which is widely available. They're all generally manually intensive, subjective, and sometimes what I feel that can't get down to the nub of the real root cause when it comes to non-conformances. You know, paired with the fact that it can sometimes feel a bit black box, or that you have this special number of people within an organisation who can, you know, are root cause analysis ninjas. To be able to do it, you know, and there is no one silver bullet that kind of can solve all of your problems, you know, but which is probably a fact of life across all orgs, not just non-conformances and audits and incidents. But sometimes it can be a bit like finding a needle in a haystack, if I'm honest.
Yeah. Alan, you look like you want to say something there.
I do. To me, it's quite. I think I do understand why organisations don't follow through with root cause analysis, because of the volume, the effort, the time, the resource it takes to do this is not. You know, the amount of audit and inspection activity that goes on daily, weekly, far outweighs the activity around an incident or an investigation. So, you know, there's a balance. The secret would be to be able to understand which of those non-conformances could have led to something critical. Yeah. So if there was a means of being able to filter out the non-conformances that really are critical to the business and apply root cause analysis to those, it's a bit like, some of you in the call will know about the kind of philosophy around serious injuries and fatalities. Low-level incidents will not all lead to a fatality. So there's a bit of a myth around that. But around 20% of your low-level incidents, they will have the potential to cause serious injury, fatality, or critical business loss. Now, if you can somehow filter them out and apply some root cause analysis thinking to those and eliminate those root causes that are spawning those incidents, then you're getting into an area where you can be a little bit more prescriptive around applying root cause analysis. Because frankly, organisations neither have the bandwidth, the time, the effort, the resource to do it for every non-conformance. That would be ludicrous, I think.
It's almost like a risk-based approach to seeing the wood for the trees.
Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly what it's like. I mean, it's like your near-miss incidents. Your near-miss incidents is effectively a non-conformance. You know, it's something that happened, it's something that went wrong, but there was no consequence, thankfully. So, you know, if you can pick out the ones that could have led to something really critical and apply some medicine to those, then you're in a good place, you know.
Yeah.
So you all sort of, you know, you understand root cause intimately because you sort of deal with it all the time. And of course, Jonathan and I both use Comet for incidents, but we're interested to know whether it can be used really effectively in the auditing process as well.
I think it can be. You know, Alan, you know, beautifully articulated the reasons why you might want to. Just because you want to doesn't mean that you can, of course, does it? Because you want something that's going to, you know, bring that information, bring that why out of audit and inspection findings, and have it make some sort of sense in the context of your overall, you know, root cause landscape, so to speak. And I like what you said before, that, you know, if you consider an audit or an inspection to be like an incident without consequences, and then if you treat findings, you know, non-conformances like incidents, then, you know, why wouldn't you want to go and investigate those formally? Why wouldn't you want to extract, you know, the root causes from those? You know, we call them dormant root causes. They've not had the chance to pop up and bite you in the bum yet. You know, why wouldn't you want to do that? But it needs a process, it needs rigor, it needs discipline, it needs a system, and of course that's where the system that we've been building comes in, because it provides all of that. But you know, the idea that you can then start to create an ecosystem of root cause, which is looking much more broadly than just incident data. To Alan's point, has got to be the place that we all want to get to. I mean, I do certainly on behalf of people that we work with, and I'll be interested towards the end when we open for questions to see what other people's opinions are as well. But marrying that proactive up with the reactive just feels like a no-brainer. But like I say, it's a discipline that organisations and projects and businesses will have to get into. Otherwise, it's opportunity lost.
Yeah, I have to say, Steve, what I like about that, and also your thinking there that you've articulated really well, is the possibility to use root cause analysis outcomes from audits and combine them or compare and contrast to your RCA outcomes from incidents to kind of try and see where you have got trends, where we are learning lessons, where we aren't learning lessons, that sort of thing. That feels to me like it would give a real insight into the broader causation. And getting back to your point earlier, your question earlier, the audit committees, going to the audit committees with that type of data, that type of intelligence, for me, wow.
Yeah, Jonathan, I think you're spot on. And, I'm a bit biased because our approach to root cause, and again, those people on the call that know us and know the Comet family well, you'll know that we've got a taxonomy, and that helps you, that coded taxonomy helps you to get those comparisons between what's coming out of audits and inspections, what's coming out of investigations, because, despite, Jonathan, what you said earlier on, there's lots of RCA technique out there. A lot of it's open source, it's free, 5 whys, the fishbone, the cause and effect. One of the drawbacks with those systems are, they're okay, but they'll often try and lead you to a single root cause, which we know never exists if you believe in our truths. Equally, you create your own root causes, you write your own root causes, so that the ability then to be able to compare, whether as a whole or as separately, becomes ever so difficult. And what we want, of course, is just that nice, clear picture of causation. I want to know at a parent level, at a rule of 12 level, at a granular 62 root cause level, where these weaknesses potentially exist. Because there's a little saying that we've got, it's the 80-20 rule. 20%, of all of your causation will be leading to about 80% of all of your incidents and non-conformances, and it'll be the same for audit. So if you can tackle it there, you can start to see the kind of uplift you can get at an organisational level when you start looking at a much broader root cause picture than perhaps you would do if you're just using it, as Alan said earlier on, sporadically, when only the big nasty incidents happen, and you wheel your RCA system out there or you wheel comment out there, you use it, and of course you'll get value from that. But boy, oh boy, you could get some huge value from a much bigger data set, because that data set will grow rapidly. Everyone is auditing and inspecting often on a daily basis, for your most simple operational daily checks, all the way through to some of those huge system-based audits that we all have to do. The audit database is significantly larger than the incident database, and that's what you want. You want that huge compendium of proactive insight there, which you can use effectively to mitigate, eliminate consequences resulting from incidents and near misses. So, I mean, give me a flavour, Jonathan. If you had that kind of information at your fingertips, you had that insight, how would you turn that into useful insight where you work or where you have worked in the past? What would you do with it?
That is the $1 million question. I have to say, but for me, that level of intelligence, being able to greatly answer the so what question. Why is it important? If we can risk profile certain areas or aspects of our management system or our business to say with not great predictability, but with a theme or pattern emerging to say, actually, Mr. Decision Maker, we feel based on the data that these are the areas that we either need to focus in, invest in, put our arm around and get our arms around it. That to me is true assurance, because you are giving the answers, you're backing it up with data, you're backing it up with fact. And, you know, like you say, the more data you get in there and it just grows and grows and grows, and that data is only ever going to get more reliable, the more good data that you get into that. So I think it's really, really good for, you know, potentially for horizon scanning, looking and not so much focusing on those rear view mirror metrics, giving you that ability to look over into the horizon and maybe even forecast.
Yeah. And you know, Jonathan, Pip, whether you agree with this or not, I don't know, but you know, I think leadership teams, executive teams, audit committees, whatever place you're taking this information to, you know, they've got an obligation to make sure that they are suitably inquisitive. And I can only speak from my experience, and it'll be interesting to see what other folk on the call think. But back to a point we were making earlier about, if I've done my audits and I'm tracking my actions and the classification or the severity of my findings, I can kind of keep nice and low. That tends to keep people happy, but that's not the purpose. It's about keeping people honest as well, isn't it? And we often talk about, you know, KPI-driven organisations, which I'll bet every one of us on this call is, and how effective some of those KPIs can be. And we've all heard about the so-called watermelon KPI, you know, green on the outside and red on the inside, because it's actually hiding something that's, you know, potentially deeply troubling. But because it's green, it gets no attention, and everyone thinks it's okay, and we're measuring the right things. Again, I don't know if that's a problem or an opinion shared, but it's certainly one that I've come across before. And if I could perhaps just turn to you again, if you had a crystal ball and you're getting all of your RCA data now for both audits, inspections, and incidents, and because that data set is growing, it's becoming increasingly rich in information and insight. And you've got the single field of view that you said, that, you know, you've got your plan, your actions, your findings, they're all in one place. You haven't got to go to your Excel spreadsheets, your Word documents, your management system to put that together and try and make sense of it. You've got it all there at your fingertips. Pitch yourself, you know, forward a year or two's time. What does that look like? What's it resulted in for you and the business?
You've got information you can always refer to. So if something, I mean, in a perfect world, with all this information, you should be going forward, and you should be able to start implementing continuous improvement on a regular basis. You should find that, I always think that if you get the quality right, you get your foundations right, your whole sort of management system right, and it's actively properly used by the business, and they're bought into it and they're trained in it, then it naturally will have an impact on your health and safety of your company. And you should find that that as your audits increase and what have you, and you start finding more and more things, then it kind of has the opposite effect on health and safety. So if anything, your incidents in health and safety should start going down, because people are actually following processes, they're following procedures, and if there is something that doesn't quite right, you're actually questioning it, and rather than just blaming it on people and saying, well, you've got it wrong, you're actually going, well, can we improve our processes? You know, has something changed that maybe we didn't stop and think about, and we didn't follow the management and change process properly, that we didn't pick it up and we didn't fix it? Well, if you're continuously doing this, then your health and safety will naturally change, your culture will get better, you'll actually start looking at training and maybe getting better trained and supporting your people, and your company will start growing, and quality will always be at forefront, and things will just improve, products will improve, customer satisfaction should improve. So it should have a massively, in a perfect world, and you with all this data and you had buy-in, you should just start on a continuously improvement sort of place. That's what I would like to get out of it. And you then get the value of why you do audits. It's not a pain in the backside to do. It's not something you've got to panic over. You're already organised there, and you're actually going, well, have we missed anything? You know, if I give you all my truthful information, what can we do better? And that's what you want your sites to be like.
And Pip, if almost to summarise that, it sounds like then that, you know, with all of that organisational uplift you get, which will be difficult not to observe, even, you know, at any kind of, you know, level in an organisation, it feels like that you're resetting the relationship that we've got with audit. Because again, I bet everyone on the call, you know, has either been somewhere, perhaps still is somewhere, that, you know, the audit plan just makes people groan. And when you come and get audited, you know, you groan even louder. You know, we pre-audit for an audit just in case they might find something you don't want them to find. You know, it's not got the best reputation, and it's a shame, because, you know, it is one of the most useful, effective, proactive tools that you can use, you know, to help, you know, manage the health, you know, of your business, and yet it's got such a bad reputation. So I think, you know, resetting that relationship is super important, and it feels like that's where you might be.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's why I try and sort of, you know, although I'm sort of more managing the auditing process at the moment, I still have that, you know, be honest with us. We'll come and help you. We will look at procedures. We will, you know, see about training. We will improve processes, and you can get buy-in because you've got the data. The other valuable thing about this is if you've got concrete data and you've actually done your root cause analysis of this sort of thing, and you've actually got hardcore evidence that you can go by and go, do you know what, this is a bit of a big project, but this is the reasons why, and you've kind of already got the start of making big improvements and getting buy-in from the upper management in that. Because you can't go with the whim and go, well, we need to do this without hardcore data and things like that. So you've got to have a story behind it that you can give to them and go, this is the reason why I want to do this, but this is the value it's going to add.
Yeah.
And if you've got that data and you can see those trends sort of going, it's a no-brainer, really.
The story, that's that I latched onto that. Then what you said there is the story that really does give the context to it. You know, it's I'm a big believer in what can't speak can't lie. So if you've got the data set there, I used to work with a chap years ago that used to just, if anyone in a meeting said, oh, this isn't a problem for us, or this is not an issue, or it's not as bad as it, straight answer back was, how do you know? How do you know it's not a problem? How can you sit there with comfort knowing that you haven't got a problem, or you do? And that's where your data set comes in. That's where your assurance, you check in. Every time for me.
Jonathan, that feels like a great place to put a full stop behind the conversation. I'm conscious of time. It leaves us a shade over 12 minutes to pick up any questions. It's nice to go out on a high, on a positive, because I think this can make a difference. I think that's what we've probably concluded as part of this discussion. But I'm sure there's lots of questions. I'm sure there'll be a few people on the call that might even disagree with some things that have been said, and that's good. That's what our discussion's about. And there might be some alternative opinions as well. So I'll be really pleased now to open the call. If you want to unmute your microphone, show your face or not, ask a question or put your hand up, we'd be delighted to field your questions or hear your opinions.
Steve, I think Neil McCollum's got his hand up first. Neil.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. Firstly, thank you very much to all of the speakers so far. I wish I'd been typing a few more notes because it was stimulating quite a few thoughts. My question is, are there any other examples people have to share about pivotal moments in time when organisations went from somewhat going through the motion and box ticking to becoming really true advocates of this mindset and methodology? So that's a question. A couple of wee observations. I wonder if they might be things to consider to help the adoption. We talked a lot about the barriers to adoption is sort of fear of the effort and the resources required to implement actions. I'm just wondering if there's something around building into the allocation of resources and budget to the audit program need to be expanded to actually build in a pool of resources to implement follow-up actions. I think also in looking at how root causes analysis has been implemented in some areas of asset and equipment management in industry, there's some providers that provide tools for root cause analysis, but then they also provide almost like a library of recommended actions to take in event of having found certain areas of weakness. And I'm just wondering if you can't prescribe exactly and make it too easy for people, because at the end of the day, you have to roll your sleeves up and do stuff. I'm just wondering if there's a further reduction we could make in time of making it easier for companies to sort of figure out these are the actions I need to take. There's almost like a library and a guidance to that. But the question is more about pivotal moments that really changed organisations' mindset about this important topic.
It's a great question, Neil. Has anybody got any examples on the call where something has happened and it's been the watershed moment for you?
Sorry, I unmuted the wrong device where the echo came from, so I do apologise. I've had similar. I've got an experience. It has been with my previous organisation. I suppose that I spent time with Viridor before joining my my current employer. So I think when the business first adopted Comet and the methodology that comes with, I think when the business saw the benefits that they get from standardizing root cause analysis, like you said, there was that light bulb moment of, wow, this has given us some insight into areas that we'd never really got down to that level of root cause. We thought we'd got to root cause, but actually there was further layers that we could drill into and actually find out that, it's not necessarily the procedure around the event that caused the issue. It was the procedure which directs how we interact with the management system, for example. I have some specific instances which I can't really go into specifics, but I've investigated some fires in the past where you just get these light bulb moments coming around all the time, actually saying, oh, we hadn't thought about that. We didn't think about that at design stage, or why decisions were made at that time, and linking up the dots with a decision made 4 years ago and some, management of change related elements. When you can join that up, like you say, in that decision that you made back then, as the impact or an impact on this event actually happening or made the consequences worse or exacerbated the event, then for me that's when you've got advocates then of this. And I'm not using Comet as a soundbite because we're on an STC webinar, but for me that's an example from my back catalogue. Hopefully you found that helpful.
Yeah, good, thank you.
And Neil, you made an astute observation about what I might term the kind of burden of audits and what comes out of them, because you do need investment, you do need resource, because the best audit program in the world, the best auditors in the world, if you haven't got the resource, and that's in people, time and money and everything else, to actually go and systematically fix things, preventative fixes, not just correction and corrective actions, things that are truly going to stop these things from occurring again. It does take effort and it does take time. And if you don't invest in it and therefore you don't follow up in the right way, then it's almost a root cause in itself, isn't it? But a self-perpetuating one, which is not.
Yeah,
it is. Yeah.
Neil, if I can offer just I'm going to bring Tom Bradford in a second, but just a slightly different perspective on that watershed kind of line to your question. Another area where we've seen a little bit of an emergence in this line of thinking has been in the cumulative performance of businesses in particular areas where lots of similar events happen, and they find that the investigation only learning that they are gaining as organisations or as supply chains is inadequate, because as Alan correctly pointed out earlier in the call, investigations thankfully don't happen all that often. And an example I would give would be in the construction industry, where they talk now about risk profiling for high risk activities, where the accumulation of or the collective understanding of the kind of proactive analysis that you get through audit and assurance and the reactive analysis that you get through incident investigation can start to signpost what they need to avoid when they're planning and ultimately deploying these high risk activities, such as, you know, heavy duty groundworks, major scaffolding erection, that kind of stuff, because the accumulation of the two then creates a much more holistic view of where that potential pain lies before they go and do that task again. And that's born out of frustration that no matter how many times large organisations do these things, they keep tripping up on the same things or similar things. So it's not one single event, it's a combination of many that get to that kind of critical point.
Yeah, I'd agree. Very good.
Thanks. Tom Bradford, I think you were next.
Yeah, thank you. There's a few observations really. One is about we use the Comet tool for our accident investigations, and we've adopted and adapted the tool to try and use it for our root cause and improvement analysis for our internal audit activities. So that's going through that process, and we'll still continue to try and do that in an effective way. We're an organisation that gets looked at externally by lots of people all of the time. So there must be a lot of data that we should be able to glean from all of those observations. And maybe that's an area that we need to look into in terms of how we do that. How do we collect valuable information from all of that level of activity? And we do invest a lot of time in our internal audits. The issue for me, and I used to work for LRQA, so I had 150 years worth of auditing experience. And what we've been driven down is this compliance thing that says, here's a standard, we've got to make sure we've covered all of the requirements over a period of time, and we can tick the boxes. And that drives our behaviour a little bit. And I think we need to, even if we don't do everything in this way, we need to take some time to go, well, let's not start with what the requirements are. Let's not start with verifying that we've conformed with anything necessarily. Let's start with the effect. What are we trying to affect down here? What's this system trying to deliver? And look at it from that. So use cause and effect as our auditing tool rather than some compliance checklist thing. So I think there's a way of we need to turn it around a little bit, our audits, and say, well, let's not start with there. Let's start at the end and seeing, are we delivering what we should be delivering? Is there information that says that, you know, we're making customers unhappy, we're not delivering on time, we're having lost time incidents, we're having near misses, we're having these things, all of those indicators, and use an audit to track back rather than start at the front and work towards the end. So that's my view. I think we need to do audits differently, and I think we've been driven down a particular route with audits due to standards and standardization of standards and external people looking at us in a certain way.
Tom, I think you're spot on. Two very very useful observations there, I think, because I think you're right. You know, I kept referring to, and I tried not to, but the word kept coming out, you know, the traditional way of doing audits, the traditional way of doing these things. And what you've articulated there, I think, just demonstrates that that traditional way of doing things perhaps does need to change completely and turn on its head, because I like the outcomes driven approach, as opposed to I've got a list of things I need to go and check are okay on that day, tick tick tick, thank you, I think I'm all right. Because quite often it just doesn't give you that depth of understanding and that depth of assurance that you need, quite frankly, as well. So I think you're bang on there.
I think you get that, the dreaded word compliance, isn't it? I hate that word because it always, to me, always insinuates that, we're just trying to comply with the, just over the line, when actually we want to be looking at best practice. What's the right thing to do? And like you put it, Tom, is that kind of, do you start at what does utopia look like, and then do we work backwards to see how much of a sprint it is or marathon it is to get there? So, you're spot on with your words there.
Thank you for sharing that, Tom. Very, very, very useful. We've got another question coming from Randy Wagstaff.
Well, good morning. How's everybody doing? I guess it's not morning where you are.
It isn't, but very, very pleased to have you all the way from stateside, Randy.
Yeah, so just a couple comments from my side. When our department's in the field, or at least when I'm in the field, when I go out and do an audit inspection, I always carry the lens of I'm doing a root cause analysis investigation in my mind. In other words, something very simple. Guy's not wearing gloves. So when he really should be. I walk up and I look at that and I think, well, this guy just destroyed his hand. So I always look at it from the lens of find the root cause in my mind, and then carry that conversation from there, assign the actions from there, and getting everybody to take that stance where we always step up during an audit inspection and say, I'm actually investigating an incident right now. Does that make sense to you?
Absolutely does.
So, I mean, it's all in how we teach folks to do audited inspections from the HSE side. And then it goes into a lot of companies that I've worked with really push a high number of audit and inspections. And for me, that's not where it's at. It's the quality of the audit and inspection. So for instance, I might require one audit or inspection within a quarter and then use the rest of that quarter to work on getting these actions closed, because that's where the heart of that audit inspection is assigning creative actions and then carrying those through to closure. And when you do so many audit and inspections, you really get bogged down with trying to close 200 actions. Whereas if I do it using the technique I just said a moment ago, I'm now focusing on quality actions and I'm reducing my number. And I just think that, some of the big machines I've worked with, we get tied up and we need to do a lot of audit and inspections, and that's going to drive down our incidents. And for me, that's not the case. The case is finding good actions. I mean, I'm with a company now that's quite smaller, and we're trying to drive our incidents down, and I'm trying to drive the teams to find those creative actions and really work hard on closing those. And then the other thing that is kind of affected by that is when you have a high number of actions and your XCOM team wants these actions closed quickly, we lose the ability to really focus on actions and get the messages out that we need to.
Randy, I love the way you've articulated the way in which you go about doing it, because it's music to my ears and music to our ears as well. Hats off to you for doing that, because you're absolutely right. I think it comes back to a little bit about that. The burden of auditing and inspecting just can become so large. Nothing meaningful gets done as a consequence, which is the big danger. But I do like that lens you look through when you're out there doing your own walk downs and your own inspections, that you're viewing it through the the eyes of root cause analysis, rather than just saying person wasn't wearing gloves. That would be easy, wouldn't it? We want to know why and what the consequences could have been, depending on what the activity that individual was doing at the time. That's where the value is. And listen, it's a wonderful place to end on that high note as well, Randy. We've just gone over the hour, because I started speaking properly precisely 60 minutes ago. There's a few people dropping off the call now because they've probably got 3:30 calls to go to, at least UK time, and they want to go and grab those. All I'd like to do is thank everybody for joining us today. Thank you for giving us your time. Jonathan, Pip, thank you very much for joining me. Really enjoyed your insight into all this. And Alan, I'm sorry for dropping you in it a couple of times there, but you did extremely well, given that I didn't prep you for it. So thank you all very, very much indeed. And I hope you can join webinar number 5, which will be coming up very shortly. Excellent. We're going to log off now. Thanks, everybody.
Cheers.
Bye.
Thanks, Steve.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Cheers. Bye now.